Roughly a week ago, a hectic final day of the 2024 AFL trade period came to a close, with a number of big-name deals getting done on D-Day. The biggest of these deals was a 3-club, 5-player mega deal involving Dan Houston, whose move had been speculated on long before the trade period, making his way from Port Adelaide to Collingwood. The deal also saw Jack Lukosius move from the Suns to Port and John Noble from Collingwood to the Suns. However, I'm not concerned about any of those players because something far more important happened when Rory Atkins made his way from the Gold Coast Suns to Port Adelaide. Well, you may be asking, why am I so interested in Rory Atkins, who's only played 3 games for the Suns this year, moving to his 3rd AFL club? Well, it means the Rat, as he's nicknamed, gets to join an exclusive club and become only the 7th player to play at AFL level for both Port Adelaide and the Adelaide Crows. Now, that is, of course, assuming that he plays at least 1 game at AFL level for Port Adelaide next year, but I'm ready to bet on him doing that. Maybe that's a bold call, but we only make the boldest and bravest calls on this channel. So if we get to this time next year and Rory Atkins has been delisted without having played a single game for Port's AFL team, well, I'll have no other choice but to delete this YouTube channel. With Rory Atkins set to join this exclusive club, which cannot yet field even half a team, I thought it was a good time to look back at his career so far and see what value he can bring to Port Adelaide. Atkins' career began when he was taken at pick 81 in the 2012 National Draft, before he spent his entire first 2 seasons on an AFL list playing in the SANFL competition. Prior to making his debut at the AFL level, he faced an injury setback at the start of 2015 when he tore his posterior cruciate ligament. When he did finally make his debut in a round 16 showdown, he managed to lock down his spot in the team and became a regular for the Crows for the next 4 seasons. His best football for the Crows came in the 2017 season when he played all 25 games for them that year, averaging 21.4 disposals a game and featuring in their grand final team. He followed up this career best season with decent years in 2018 and 19, however he fell out of favour with the Crows in 2020, playing only 4 games that season. With the writing on the wall that he would be moved on at the end of that season, Atkins informed the Crows that he would be pursuing a rival offer at the end of the year, and being an unrestricted free agent meant that he could freely move wherever he wanted. He eventually found a suitor in the Gold Coast Suns who offered him a 5-year deal. He initially struggled to work his way into the Suns team as well, but he found his spot in 2023 playing as a halfback flank and getting back somewhere near his best. Unfortunately, with Damien Hardwick moving in 2024, he once again found himself out of favour, playing only 3 games for the whole year. Despite having a year left to run on his contract, the writing was once again on the wall for Atkins, and fortunately for him, an opportunity arose to move back to the state where his AFL journey began, and he was lumped up in a big deal as part of Dan Houston getting to Collingwood. As of recording this video, Rory Atkins has played 138 games at the AFL level, which is nothing to scoff at. Of those games, 101 came at his original club in the Adelaide Crows, while he played a further 37 at the Gold Coast Suns. How many more games he can manage remains to be seen. Another 12 would get him to his 150 game milestone, which is certainly a fair achievement. Now, I think it's certainly possible that he could reach this milestone at Port Adelaide. I don't think he's going to be a best 22 player by any means, but he could definitely be a good top-up player for them, play along the halfback flank, or maybe as a wingman or half forward. I feel like he's the type of player that is probably going to be the sub a fair few times next year as well. So even if he has 4 or 5 sub games and then another 7 or 8 full games, I think he could easily play the 12 games and reach that 150 milestone. He's definitely not going to be anything special at Port Adelaide, but I still think he could be a serviceable depth player. Well, that is the story of Rory Atkins' career so far. But there are, of course, 6 other players who have played for both the Crows and Power at AFL level, so I thought we'd look back at those now. Considering that Atkins hasn't actually played a game for Port Adelaide at the time of recording this video, technically the most recent addition to this list is actually Billy Frampton. Frampton's AFL career began when he was taken at pick 84 in the 2014 National Draft. However, he wasn't able to play his first game at AFL level until the final round of the 2018 season. Unfortunately for Billy, this would be his first of only 3 games that he would play for Port Adelaide at AFL level. He showed some pretty solid form in the SANFL in 2019, kicking 34 goals from 14 games. However, it wasn't enough to cement his spot in the team, as there were just too many players on the Port Adelaide list ahead of him in his position. So he jumped ship at the end of 2019 and was traded to the Adelaide Crows. At the Crows, he saw a little bit more success than what he had at Port Adelaide, but he was still very much on the outers in that team. Continuing to play as a key forward, pinch hitting in the ruck for his first 2 seasons, he only managed to kick 5 goals in 2020 and 2 goals in 2021. That was alongside 11 behinds. After failing to fire as a key forward, he switched things up and reinvented himself as a key defender in 2022, although he only managed to play a handful of games this season. Having only played 24 games in 7 seasons, it looked as if time may be running out on Billy Frampton's AFL career, but luckily for him, Collingwood came knocking, and at the end of 2022, he was traded to the Magpies, and this is where his career started to turn around. Frampton wasn't a walk-up starter for Collingwood in 2023. He missed their round 1 matchup with Geelong, but Jeremy Howe's horrific arm injury he sustained in this game opened up a spot for him in the back line, and he managed to hold his spot in the team for most of the year, although not always as a key defender. He played a number of key roles in the ruck that year and even went down forward when needed. Unfortunately though for him, by the time finals rolled around, he was dropped from the team again, and it looked like that would be the last we'd see of him in 2023. Or at least that was until Dan McStay injured his knee during the preliminary final, once again opening up a spot for Billy Frampton in the team. It never looked like the day would come for Frampton, but on the 30th of September 2023, he stood on the grass of the MCG, playing off in the biggest game of the year. Of course, we all know what happens next. Collingwood hold off Brisbane in one of the greatest grand finals of all time. For Frampton though, it wasn't exactly his finest performance. He finished the day with only 2 disposals, which was half the amount of clangers he had. So from a stats point of view, it was a pretty poor day. However, that's not to completely discredit him, as he did play a pretty good role on Harris Andrews for most of the day. Not to say Andrews was taken out of the game completely, but he wasn't afforded the space to roam around and mark everything that comes his way like usual. Up until this point in time, Frampton has played 58 AFL games, with 3 of those being at Port Adelaide, 21 at the Crows, and 34 for Collingwood, which is more than he played combined at the 2 SA clubs. It's not exactly the career of legend status, however he has won an AFL premiership, which is something that most people certainly can't say they've achieved. Brad Symes is the next player on this list. I assume that's how you say his name anyway. And he was another one who started off at Port Adelaide. He was taken at pick 30 in the 2003 AFL draft, but played most of his time in his first few seasons at Port Adelaide for Central Districts in the SANFL competition, because if you remember at this time, Port Adelaide's SANFL team were sort of a separate entity to their AFL team. It's not like now how if an AFL player from the Port Adelaide team gets dropped, they go down to their SANFL team equivalent, the Magpies. Symes played 12 games in 2006 for Port Adelaide, but didn't really feature much in 2007, up until the grand final where he replaced Michael Wilson, who snapped his Achilles tendon in the preliminary final. So Symes had the opportunity to play in a premiership winning team this year, but of course we all know how that panned out. Fortunately for him though, it wasn't all doom and gloom, because the following day he did play in a successful grand final for the Central Districts, because at this time the Central Districts were absolutely nuts. Seriously, they made 12 grand finals in a row. That is nuts. After the 2007 season, he requested a trade to the Adelaide Crows and he got his wish. He immediately became a more regular member of the team, playing 16 games in 2008 and playing a career-high 20 games in 2009. In 2010 and 11 though, his career started to take a bit of a turn for the worst. He suffered multiple injury setbacks, and by the time 2012 rolled around, he fell well out of favour and managed only 2 games. However, he did manage to win the 2012 SANFL Magarey medal, which if you don't know is essentially the equivalent to the AFL Brownlow medal, so good job to him, but he was delisted following this, so bit of a weird season. He did continue to play with the Central Districts in the SANFL competition for 2 more seasons. However, he retired in 2014 following an 11th concussion injury. Matthew Bode was another player who started off his career at Port Adelaide before making the switch to the Adelaide Crows. He was taken at pick 3 in the 1998 pre-season draft, not the national draft, before he played a total of 29 games with the Power. In his first 3 seasons at Port, he had some injury troubles and he just couldn't force his way into the team, so he moved to the crosstown rivals in the Crows, where he didn't get off to the best start. He suffered a bad break in his hand in his first ever game for the Crows in 2001 and didn't play another game that season. In 2002, he finally managed to get his body right and he played pretty decently, kicking 23 goals from 25 games, averaging nearly 18 disposals as well. He then suffered some more injury troubles in his next few seasons. However, in 2006, he managed to break through with a career best year, kicking 32 goals as a small forward, which is not a bad year. Unfortunately, just as things were getting good for him though, he suffered a significant knee injury in his first outing of the 2007 season and didn't play another game that year. He was then delisted at the end of the season and didn't play another game at AFL level. All in all, it was a pretty decent career. 108 games at the highest level is nothing to be ashamed of. However, he had so much more potential that his body just simply didn't allow him to reach. Brett Chalmers is the next player that we will be talking about, and his story is a bit of an interesting one. He was first drafted into the VFL, now known as the AFL of course, at just age 16. He was taken with pick 103 by Richmond. However, he didn't take up the offer to go to the club, as at that point in time you could still earn reasonable money in the other state league competitions around Australia. So he chose to stay in his home state and continue playing for Port Adelaide in the SANFL competition. Despite not ever intending to play for Richmond, he still was on their list for the next 3 years, during which time he couldn't re-enter the draft. Once those 3 years were up, he did re-enter the National AFL draft. However, here's where things get interesting. Prior to draft night, Chalmers had contacted all the clubs in the league except Collingwood, informing them that if he was drafted by any of the clubs, he would continue to play in the SANFL. This was considered draft tampering by the AFL, and in May of 1993, Brett Chalmers admitted his guilt, with the AFL in response handing him a massive $30,000 fine and made him ineligible to play for Collingwood for the next 3 years. After his first season with the Pies, where he wasn't allowed to play, they traded him off to the Adelaide Crows, who were the only SA club in the AFL at the time. He was with Adelaide for 4 seasons, where he only managed 50 games due to a succession of injuries, before moving back to Port Adelaide, this time to play with their AFL team. At Port, he played just the 2 seasons and managed only 25 games before his AFL career came to a close at the end of 1999. Outside of football, Brett Chalmers' son, Kyle Chalmers, is currently an Australian Olympic swimmer, so clearly sport runs in the family genes and not just AFL football. Ian Downsborough was an undersized ruckman standing at 192 centimetres, whose journey didn't start with either of the 2 SA clubs. It actually started with West Coast. He was originally from West Perth in the WAFL and was taken at pick 54 in the 1994 AFL draft. In his first season with the Eagles, he only played the 1 game. However, he won the 1995 WAFL Premiership with West Perth, so a great achievement there. In 1996, he got a bit more game time at the top level, playing 19 games, including the qualifying final. However, he was dropped for the semi-final, and the following year was picked up as a free agent for Port Adelaide, who were coming into the competition that year. He only played the 1 season with Port Adelaide, playing just the 7 games, with illness wiping out almost his entire season, before moving on to the Adelaide Crows, where he played another 2 seasons. His time at the Crows saw him play only the 12 games at AFL level, and following 1999 he was delisted by the Crows and never played another game of AFL football again. The final player that we'll be looking at in this video is David Brown. Interestingly enough, during the research of this video, I found out that there have been 3 David Browns to play VFL or AFL football, so there's that. The David Brown that we'll be looking at played 91 games in the AFL system, most of those for the Crows, as he joined the AFL system when the Crows started up. Prior to the beginning of his AFL career, he won a number of premierships with Port Adelaide's SANFL team, and all throughout his AFL career, whenever he would be dropped back to the reserves team, He would go back to play with Port Adelaide's SANFL team, and he won a total of 6 premierships in the league. Not bad. He even managed to win a Jack Odie medal for best on ground on grand final day in 1996. So while he never quite made it as an AFL player, he'll always know that he was part of one of the most successful Port Adelaide SANFL teams of all time. Additionally, David Brown also holds the unique honour of being an inaugural player for both the Adelaide Crows and Port Adelaide's AFL teams. That's something that not many people can say about themselves. So that brings to a close this video where we look back at a unique list of players who had the honour of playing for both SA teams in the AFL. I hope you guys did enjoy watching this video as much as I did making it. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below what your thoughts on the video were, and also comment down some video ideas for the off season, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.